Hey beauties and beasts, welcome back for another cozy yet chilling night with me. So get comfortable, grab your snacks, your coffee, your tea, your emotional support blanket, whatever you need. Tonight we're heading to the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, where the rivers are everywhere and the locals know there are certain waters you just don't go near. And one of my viewers found out why. So this story was sent in by one of my viewers from Vietnam. She asked me to call her Lynn, which isn't her real name, but she swears this actually happened to her when she was a kid. And you can decide for yourself what to believe. So let me set the scene for you. It's August 1996, rainy season in Dong Thap province, deep in the Mekong Delta of southern Vietnam. The air is thick, humid, the kind of heat that just sits on you. The rivers are swollen and brown, with sediment carried all the way from the Tibetan Plateau. And in a small village along a tributary of the Tien River, 12-year-old Lynn is spending her summer vacation at her grandmother's house, bored out of her mind, counting the days until school starts again. She has no idea she's about to find out why her grandmother never let her swim alone. Why there are certain stretches of water the villagers refuse to go near. She's about to learn about the Mada, the water ghost. Let's get into her story. Before we get into the story, I will recommend some Korean products that I use these days. I try so many Korean skincare products. I buy a lot, I test a lot, but no matter what I use, I always end up going back to products made for sensitive skin. And these days I have a lot of people asking me to recommend skincare products. And because everyone has different skin types, these are also the products I feel the most comfortable recommending. So recently I've been using the APLB Glutathione plus Niacinamide line, and I wanted to share it because it really worked well for me personally, especially with my problems like dullness, uneven skin texture, and reactive skin. So I have their serum, their face cream, body cream, sunscreen, and their face masks. But I believe they do have a lot more than this, even supplements like pills. So these are my two favorites that I actually use daily. This is their ampule serum, and you might have seen me using a lot of this in my other videos. And recently I've been using their facial cream a lot. So what worked for me is just how gentle they are while still showing visible improvement. So after using these products, my skin didn't look as tired in the morning. The little uneven bumps along my cheeks looked a lot smoother, and the brightness around my face came back. And even the areas around my jaw and mouth felt a bit tighter, less saggy or droopy. Everything is so lightweight, unscented, that's important. I always use unscented products, and calming. And even on my sensitive days, it didn't sting, burn, or make my skin red, which is honestly rare for brightening products. So if you're interested, you want to check them out yourselves, I will leave the link below. You can purchase them at YesStyle, and with my code, BATB12, you can get 12% off. So yeah, happy shopping. Okay, before I get into what happened to Lynn, you need to understand something about this part of Vietnam. The Mekong Delta is called the Nine Dragon River Delta in Vietnamese because of how the Mekong splits into all these branches as it reaches the sea. But honestly, 9 is a low estimate. There are thousands of waterways here, rivers, canals, irrigation channels, flooded rice paddies, over 3,000 miles of water running through the lives of 18 million people. You don't just live near the water here, you live on it. Houses are on stilts, markets float on boats, kids learn to paddle a sampan before they learn to ride a bike. Everything revolves around the water. But here's the thing most people don't realize. Even with all that water everywhere, most kids in Mekong Delta can't actually swim. Even today, only about a third of children in this region know how to swim properly. Schools don't teach it. There aren't pools. And the rivers are deceptive. They look calm, but the currents underneath are strong and unpredictable. The banks are slick with mud. The water is so murky, you can't see past your knees. You have no idea what's below you. So every year, over 2,000 children drown in Vietnam. The Mekong Delta has some of the highest rates in the country. And back in 1996, when Lynn was 12, there weren't any government swimming programs or water safety campaigns. There were just the old warnings, stories parents told to keep kids away from the water. Stories about what was waiting beneath the surface. And Lynn's grandmother called them Mada, water ghosts. In Vietnamese folklore, Mada are the spirits of people who drowned badly, not peacefully, but violently, struggling, terrified. And according to the belief, that kind of death traps the soul in the water. They can't move on. They can't escape. The stories describe them as bloated, waterlogged corpses, gray, swollen skin, river weeds tangled in their hair, eyes still wide open, still watching something. And they want something specific. So a Mada can only be freed if someone else drowns in the same spot. The new victim becomes the new ghost, and the old one finally gets to move on. So they wait. They watch from below. And when someone gets too close to the water, wades in a little too deep, swims out a little too far, the Mada reaches up, grabs their ankle, and pulls them under. The victim drowns, becomes the new Mada, and the cycle continues. It's been going on as long as anyone can remember, and that is why the old folks in Lynn's village knew which waters to avoid. And they say it's not because of currents or snakes or crocodiles, because some waters had Mada in them, and Mada are always hungry. Lynn knew all the stories. Her grandmother had been telling them her whole life, voice dropping to a whisper during the scary parts. But Lynn was 12. She'd been to school in the city, and she'd learned about science. She knew people drowned because of currents and panic, not because of ghost hands pulling them down. So to her, the Mada stories were just superstition, old people trying to scare kids into being careful. Besides, it was summer, it was hot, and there was absolutely nothing to do except help dry fish and swat mosquitoes and slowly go crazy from boredom. The canal behind her grandmother's house was off limits. It was narrow, branching off into the rice paddies, completely overgrown with water hyacinths. So this forbidden path, was so choked with plants that boats couldn't get through, even if anyone wanted to go there, which nobody did. And her grandmother said a girl drowned there a long time ago. Before the American War, before the French maybe, a girl about Lynn's age who slipped on the muddy bank while washing clothes, and her body was never found. The Mada keeps her grandmother would say, making a sign to ward off evil. And she keeps others. She's been waiting a long, long time for someone to take her place, she would say. And Lynn thought that was ridiculous. The canal was barely 2 meters wide. You could see the other side from the porch. How could anyone drown in something that small? But that August afternoon, with her grandmother napping and her mother at the market, and the heat so bad she felt like she was melting, Lynn found herself walking toward that canal anyway. Just to look, she told herself, just to prove there was nothing there. Maybe cool her feet for a minute. And the path was overgrown. Nobody came this way, so she had to push through vines and step over branches, her sandals squelching in mud that never dried. The sounds of the village faded behind her until there was just silence. Not even silence, an absence of sound. The canal was quieter than it should have been. Normally, even remote waterways in the delta have noise. Fish splashing, insects chirping, frogs, birds. This stretch of water had nothing, complete silence. Water hyacinths covered the surface so thick, it looked almost solid. A carpet of green leaves and purple flowers. It was pretty, but it looked somehow wrong. The plants weren't moving, and Lynn noticed there was no breeze here. She could see trees swaying in the distance, but right here at the water's edge, the air was perfectly still. She stood there for a minute, looking at the water. She waited, but nothing happened. Just a canal, just water and plants and mud. She sat down and let her feet dangle over the edge. The mud was slick, just like her grandmother always warned. She had to dig her fingers into the grass to keep from sliding. The bank had dropped off steep, straight down into brown water. She couldn't see the bottom. She dipped her feet in just past her ankles. The water was cold, and that was weird. It was August. Rivers here are warm in summer, almost like bath water. But the water was cold, like it had never seen sunlight, like it came from somewhere deep underground. Lynn shivered. She should leave. She knew she should leave. But her feet felt heavy, and the cold actually felt good after all that heat. And she was still trying to prove to herself there was nothing here. She kicked her feet gently. The hyacinths bobbed on the surface, purple flowers nodding. Then something brushed against her ankle. Lynn froze. Probably a fish. Catfish, carp. The canals were full of them. Maybe just a fish. But fish don't have fingers. It came again. Not a brush this time. A grip. Cold fingers wrapping around the ankle, one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4. And a thumb pressing into the flesh above her heel. She looked down. The hyacinths had parted, just a little, just enough. And through the gap, rising from the murky water, she could see something pale. Something that might have been a face. Gray skin, bloated, dark hair spreading through the water like ink. And eyes wide open, staring up at her. The hands tightened and pulled. Lynn screamed. She threw herself backward, clawing at the grass, at the mud, at anything. But the bank was slick, and her grip kept slipping. And that hand was strong, way stronger than a child's hand should be. And she was sliding toward the water, the hyacinths reaching up like welcoming arms. Her hip hit the water. The cold shot through her whole body. She could feel the bottom dropping away, nothing solid beneath her, and the hand kept pulling, and she couldn't breathe, she couldn't think. Then something else grabbed her. Different hands. Warm hands. They gripped her wrists and pulled, hauling her backward with impossible strength. The cold fingers around her ankle tightened one last time, desperate and furious, then released. She was flying backward, landing hard on her back in the grass, staring at the white sky, gasping. Her grandmother stood over her. The old woman was holding a bamboo pole, the kind for pushing boats. Her face was gray. Her eyes were wide with something that looked like terror. She was breathing hard. "I told you," she said, voice shaking. "I told you never to come here." Lynn couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She could only lie there with her heart pounding so hard. She thought it might just break through her chest. Her grandmother knelt beside her, running her hands over Lynn's face, her arms, her legs. When she got to Lynn's ankle, she stopped. Lynn looked down, and there were marks, red marks already bruising, 4 lines and a thumb. A shape of a small hand, a child's hand. That night, after dark, her grandmother told her the full story. The girl who drowned there wasn't alone. According to the oldest people in the village, people who heard it from their grandparents, who heard it from their grandparents, there were 2 girls at that canal the day it happened. Sometime in the early 1900s, during the French colonial period, there were sisters. The younger one was 9 or 10, small for her age, always laughing. The older one was 12 or 13, and she was serious, always watching out for her little sister. And they went to that canal because it was quiet, because the hyacinths made it pretty. They didn't know it was deeper than it looked, and the banks were treacherous, that the mud at the bottom was like quicksand. The younger sister slipped first. One second, she was kneeling at the edge, scrubbing clothes. The next second, the mud gave way, and she was in the water. And it was cold, and she couldn't find the bottom, couldn't find anything solid. Just water closing over her head, and weeds tangling around her legs, and something pulling her down. The older sister jumped in after her, and neither of them came out. The villagers searched for days, dragged the canal with tents, sent swimmers down again and again until the swimmers refused to go anymore. They said something was wrong with that water, something that pulled at them, something that didn't want them there. And the sisters' bodies were never found. Their mother waited by the canal every day for a month, calling their names until the grief broke her mind and the family took her away. And eventually, the villagers stopped searching, stopped using that canal at all, let the hyacinths grow over it, let it become a wild place, a place children were forbidden to go. And the story started. Fishermen hearing children's voices from beneath the surface. A woman seeing 2 wet girls standing on the bank at twilight before they vanished. A young man waking up near the canal with his legs in the water and small hands around his ankles. He ran and never went back. 2 girls went into that water, Lynn's grandmother said quietly, and 2 Mada came out. But they're not the same. The younger one, she's the one who pulls. She's been trying to find a replacement for almost 100 years. She's angry. She's desperate. She has waited too long. And she paused. Her hands touched the bruises on Lynn's ankle, gentle. But the older one is different. She's still trying to save her sister. She can't let go. Even after all this time, she stays in that water because she can't bear to leave her sister alone. And when someone gets too close, when the younger one reaches up to pull them under, the older one reaches up to push them back. Lynn thought about that cold hand around her ankle. Small, child-sized, desperate. Then she thought about the warm hands that grabbed her wrists and pulled her to safety. Her grandmother had been standing over her with a bamboo pole, but the hands that saved her had grabbed her wrists, had pulled her. "You were lucky," her grandmother said, like she knew what Lynn was thinking. "The older sister got to you first, but she can't fight forever. She's been fighting for 100 years, trying to save everyone her sister tries to take. And she's tired. She's so tired." She looked at Lynn, fierce and afraid. "Don't go near that canal again. Don't go near any water you don't know. The older sister saved you once. She might not be able to do it again." Lynn never went near that canal again. She finished her summer in the village, stayed close to the house, counted the days until she could leave. When August ended, she went back to the city and didn't look back. She grew up, university in Ho Chi Minh City, a job, a husband, kids of her own. The years passed and she thought about the Mada less and less. It became a weird childhood memory, something that might have been a dream, might have been the heat getting to her. But she never let her children swim unsupervised. Never. Not in pools, not in the ocean, nowhere. Her husband thought she was overprotective. Her kids complained, But Lynn never explained, never told them about the cold hand around her ankle when she was 12. Some things, she figured, were better left alone. And her grandmother lived to 93, outlived her husband, her siblings, nearly everyone who remembered the old stories. When she finally passed away in her sleep, Lynn went back for the funeral. The canal was still there. She could see it from the back porch, outgrown, silent, hyacinths blooming purple. Nobody had touched it in decades. No buildings nearby, no fishing, nothing. Just sitting there like a wound in the middle of all the village noise. Lynn stood on that porch for a long time. The bruises had faded years ago, but she still felt them sometimes. 4 lines and a thumb. Are you still there? She thought. Both of you? Still waiting? The water didn't answer. The hyacinths swayed in a breeze she couldn't feel. She turned and went inside. When Lynn's daughter was old enough, she told her about the mada. Not to scare her, because some warnings need to be passed down. The water in Vietnam takes so many children every year. The danger doesn't need ghosts to be real. Stay away from water you don't know, Lynn told her, echoing what her grandmother told her decades ago. And if you ever feel something cold brushed against your ankle, run. Don't look. Don't wait. Just run. The canal behind her grandmother's house is still there today. The village has changed around it. New roads, new houses, electricity, internet, all the modern stuff. But that one stretch of water stays untouched. Nobody builds near it. Nobody fishes in it. The kids stay away, even if they don't know exactly why. Sometimes, early in the morning, when the mist rises off the water, the old folks say you can still see 2 shapes moving beneath the surface. 2 girls, forever young, forever trapped. Sisters, even in death, bound together by love and tragedy and water that won't let them go. So that is Lynn's story. And like I said at the beginning, you can decide for yourself what to believe. And I did some digging into the Mada legend after she sent this in, and here's what I found. There aren't really documented sightings the way you'd see with, say, ghost investigations in the West. Mada stories exist almost entirely as oral folklore, passed down through families, shared between fishermen, whispered to children as warnings. One Vietnamese researcher who tried to compile information about these spirits said the hardest part was that everything comes from word of mouth, stories told around dinner tables, tales shared on forums, accounts from grandparents who heard it from their grandparents. But here is what is documented. Certain stretches of water in Vietnam are avoided by locals who won't explain why. Families still hire monks and shamans to perform rituals along the rivers when someone drowns, not just to find the body, but to appease whatever might be holding it. And in communities along the Mekong, there are places where nobody fishes, nobody swims, and nobody builds. Places that have been left alone for generations. The Vietnamese themselves will tell you these stories probably started as a way to keep children away from dangerous water. And that makes sense. Over 2,000 kids drown in Vietnam every year. The rivers look calm, but they're not. The warning serves a purpose. But then you hear a story like Lynn's, the cold hand, the bruises in the shape of small fingers, the warm hands that pulled her back when her grandmother was still holding a bamboo pole. And you wonder, maybe it's just folklore, maybe it's just a way to explain tragedy, or maybe in those quiet, overgrown canals where the water hyacinths bloom purple and the air goes still, maybe something is waiting. And I'll let you decide. That is a wrap for today. See you guys in our next episode. Bye bye.